Welcome to the YoggNation, the Spirit of Gratitude podcast on the OneIntegration platform. Hello, friends. My name is Yogesh Patel, and this podcast explores the themes of bullying, self-awareness, and the power of our inner spirit, including the silent battles we all face. Join me every week as I invite high-profile guests as we explore how adversity shapes us, how gratitude lifts us, and how we can all uncover the inner strength that we all have within ourselves. Join the conversation. I appreciate you listening in. My next guest hails from the business world. Steve Multer is a Fortune 500 brand storyteller who has delivered over 20,000 live talks and 800 events. He's been a spokesperson for companies like Cisco, Panasonic, HP, Siemens, through his variety of conferences and seminars. His message of leading with value connects to the heart of what this podcast serves. That is how does self-awareness and our inner spirit guide personal growth and professional impact. And with gratitude, welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thank you so much, Yog. Really appreciate it. It's great to be here with you and with all of your listeners.
Absolutely, which I call the citizens of YoggNation.
Citizens of YoggNation, I love that.
Well, Steve, I'm really curious to find out what is corporate storytelling, and how does it tie into the podcast theme of gratitude?
All right, perfect place to start. So corporate storytelling is actually about a 125-year-old concept, 130-year-old concept. We've kind of adapted it, but initially it was a concept of really what we called experiential storytelling, and it started with, if you want to go back and target a specific date, about 1895, John Deere and Company, and hopefully most of your listeners know John Deere, a North American tractor farm equipment manufacturer. But long after the death of its founder, of John Deere himself, the John Deere Company kind of reached a point in their marketing and their advertising where they looked around and they said, we've got a lot of competition. We're having a very hard time getting our product to market and then getting people to differentiate our product within a crowded marketplace. So they published a pamphlet basically called The Furrow. And in 1895, this pamphlet came out with a foundational concept called content marketing, where they said, instead of saying, please buy our tractor, here's the hoe, here's the backhoe, here's the different equipment that you can purchase like anybody else had done up until that point in Sears Roebuck's catalogs or wherever else, they decided to tell stories of life on the land. What is it like to be a farmer? What is the actual day-to-day existence of the farming community? How do you sell to your marketplace? How do you tell them what you are all about at your heart and why you do what you do and why you love it? And if we can tell that story and get people to understand that we understand them, they will purchase our product to be a part of our community, right? That was the whole concept of content marketing, 1895. And we flash forward again and again. And by the 80s and the 90s, this content marketing concept is starting to evolve into what we now know as corporate storytelling. Rather than telling you what my corporation does, builds, sells, market, let me talk to you about what is at the heart of my company, why I care about you as my customer and partner community, and let's see if we can make a connection there with one another in order to make life better on both sides. You will buy more of our product, but our product is going to do more than just put something into your hand. It's going to improve the value of your existence. And when we think about gratitude in life, it can come in from so many different areas. Gratitude is not simply saying, I love my life and I'm grateful for it. It can also be a matter of how do I serve others in order to create gratitude in them for what I do, but their connection to me creates gratitude for me. So that's really the foundations of corporate storytelling.
I would also have to think that a lot of it is getting the emotions out of these brands. So how does that happen? How does that work in technology? Because with Cisco and Panasonic and HP, it's, you're selling a tool, but there's no really emotion to it, in my opinion. Maybe there is.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're exactly right. It's a big red tape environment, right? Where you've got to hit the bottom line. No bottom line, no multinational, multi-billion-dollar organization. We've got to sell product. The passion is really your core differentiator. So if you think about the people in your world who you want to engage with, who you want to interact with, if somebody is simply trying to pitch you a product, There is no connection point there. You know exactly what their goal and their target is. They need to sell you something in order to make their income, in order to earn their paycheck or their bonus structure or whatever it happens to be. They have to move product. If they don't, leadership comes down the pike, down and down and down the pyramid. And next thing you know, you're being told you're not performing enough. Get out. We don't want you. We don't want you to be a part of what we're doing. The people who are doing that simply to earn the salary, we can tell who they are. We are innate as human beings. We have a human-to-human engagement, interaction, and connection. But when we meet somebody who seems genuinely excited about what they do, genuinely passionate about the work that they do and the way their work can create benefit not only for themselves but for others, we link into that passion. So the three pillars of corporate storytelling that I always talk about are value, passion, and connection. Value being, what can I do for you? Not what can you do for me with your wallet, not how can I get you to hand me your credit card or a $20 bill or sign here on the dotted line in a contract, but what is the value that I can provide for you in order to achieve value myself? That's pillar number one. Pillar number two is passion. If I can share passion with you, I'm much more likely to get you to want to get on board with that passion and join me so that together we get very excited about something and we make great things happen. And then the connection is where we figure out that human to human existence. What do we have in common? Where do we align with one another? Because the more alignment we can share, the easier it is to share the passion, which means the easier it is for us to create the value for one another. So all three of those go hand in hand.
So really what you're doing is you're simply tying in what does the person need or want from you, aligning those values, those products, those differentiators to what will service them.
That's 100% right. It's what I call a flow of content hierarchy in the kind of work that I do. And this is what I try to help large organizations with, Fortune brands and so forth, is to realize that there are different ways to communicate with another individual. And the way we communicate becomes so vital. Our instinct when we are thinking on a business front is, I have a product to sell. I need to tell you about that product. I need to tell you what it does. And I need to tell you why you should go out and buy that product. And it's a very unilevel, straightforward, frankly, pretty boring concept. Most of us get hit with somewhere between 10 and 20,000 pieces of stimuli per day asking us to buy something, whether we're looking at an ad or the side of a bus stop or at a magazine or whatever it is that we do, right? So this flow of content hierarchy says that the best way for us to communicate with a fellow human being, because what are corporations made up of? A bunch of individual human beings, right? We all have our own specific individual wants and needs. And the best way we can approach them is in this order: human first, consumer second, employee third. First, I need to talk to you as a friend, as a fellow traveler, as a fellow human being who has your own sets of wants and needs that are probably very different from my own. But if I don't care about your wants and needs, I can't connect with you as a human. All I am is a people machine.
If I can interject, how do you build that initial trust?
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and let's start with that. My mantra, which anybody who's ever worked with me, they've heard me say it a million times, they get really bored with it. But my mantra in life is, don't tell them what you want to tell them what they want to hear. What that means is, how can you engage in any sort of a conversation, communication, whether it's a speech or a keynote, or you're leading a breakout session, or you're speaking with your team at work, or you're just sitting across the table from somebody. How can I begin not by saying, here's what I need you to know, here's what I want to talk about. It's, who are you? And how do I provide value for you in our engagement? How can I find out who you are as a person and make you my priority rather than prioritizing myself? That's how we create that human first engagement, is by being curious about other people, wanting to learn about them and what makes them tick, what motivates them. Because if we can speak to them on that level, they now start to like us, they trust us, they say, yeah, this person seems pretty cool. I think I'd like to hear more about what they know or what they have to say. We become curious in one another. Curiosity is so key, right?
And that's part of probably emotional intelligence that you speak of.
Big part of it. So when you look at leadership training, for example, of what that means today, right? When we look at executive leadership coaching, which I do a great deal of and many other people do as well, that's a big part of it. That emotional intelligence, that EI factor, is so vital, because we may have a phenomenal message to share, But until people are open to hearing that message is going to fall on deaf ears. It's going to run up against a wall, right? So you and I have talked about it before. It's an old quote, terrific quote that says, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." Well, the best way to start caring is to care about another individual, to care about another human. Demonstrate that care; they'll follow you anywhere, right?
And I think for the citizens of YoggNation who are looking for some sort of nugget of wisdom, a spark, or inspiration, it looks like the tie-in between your message to perhaps a young adult or adolescent who may not know the inner workings of how a corporation works, but what you describe with corporate storytelling leads to that personal branding of that individual. Do you agree?
Couldn't agree with you more. I think that's actually a really important point, and a point, that most people never really think about. And I'll kind of add to it. It starts so much younger than we imagine. Our personal brand, we tend to look at that strictly as what we have to sell, right? It's a financial commodity. Here's the name of my company. Here's what I do for a living. You ask somebody, "Hey, how you doing?" And they give you their resume, right? And what you really want to know is, no, how are you doing? Tell me about you. Well, that personal brand starts when we're very, very young, because it's not just how the world sees us, it's how we see ourselves. And what we tend to do is we lack trust or faith in ourselves and in our personal brand, because we believe that everybody is doing better than we are. Everyone else is smarter than we are. The grass is always greener on the other side. Everybody else has skills or values that we don't possess, and we undermine our own ability to build a good personal brand, which then undermines our ability to create that connection point with others, to value their personal brand and to put those two pieces together. I know that's kind of heady and high-minded, but I think that's so much of what it is that you're talking about. We don't trust ourselves enough.
But it's simply just the awareness to know that, okay, I don't trust myself. And now let me find a tool or resources that can help unclog the clutter that I'm experiencing. Because a lot of it is, what's in between the ears. So again, for the person that's listening, how do you give them not necessarily a playbook, but just some basic guidance in terms of how do you not knock yourself down?
Wow, I'm telling you, if there were only a pill that we could all swallow that would give us that faith in ourselves that we need. I want to go back to, it was a great 2014 study in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, and it was such a powerful study. It studied why people have trouble speaking in public, right? Still our number one fear to this day globally. What's the old Jerry Seinfeld line? Something like, if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be the one in the box than the one giving the eulogy, which I always thought was a great line. But this study in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, it developed an acronym, because heaven knows we need more acronyms in our lives, right? The acronym is FNE, fear of negative evaluation. And this is something that we put on ourselves. The reason that we have a hard time speaking, or a hard time trusting our own personal brand, believing that we're in a good personal space, not doubting ourselves, is FNE, fear of negative evaluation. If you expand that out, it is fear of judgment from or negative evaluation by others, right? And we learn this from an extremely young age. When we're kids, when we're little, and you know this, if you have children, or if you have little sisters and brothers, or if you have nieces and nephews, there's nothing that a kid loves more than performing for others. Your 2-year old, your 3-year old, your 4-year old, look at me, look at me. I'm going to put on a show. I'm going to do puppets. I'm going to dance. I want to sing for you. I want to tell you stories. And they want all eyes on them. They love the attention, and they want to perform, and they want to show you how wonderful they are. And what happens is, as we get older, bit by bit, piece by piece, year by year, experience by experience, we start to undermine that sense of confidence, that desire to show people how wonderful we are and how much we have to offer to them. And we knock down bit by bit. It starts very young, when we're in elementary school and the teacher asks for a response to a question, and the kid shoots their hand in the air and gives the answer, and the teacher says, "No, that's not right. That's not the correct answer. Anyone else?" And that kid shrinks a little bit. And then you get a little bit older, and now you're out on the field playing at recess, and somebody kicks the ball to you and you miss it, or you stumble, or they make a goal, and now you feel stupid. You feel like you let everybody else down. And then the older you get, those kinds of experiences of doing something wrong turn to, well, now that cute girl that I like won't like me back. Or my parents will think that I'm not living up to my expectation. By the time we reach high school, college,
That's a huge one.
right? That's a huge one. And performance is big too. You miss out on the internship and somebody else gets the internship and you feel, well, they must be better. They must be smarter than I am. We chip away at our own personal value. So how do you get that value back is a great question. And let's just talk about a couple of ways, because you asked such a good question there. You said, what are some tips and tricks to actually regain that trust in ourselves, our own sense of personal value? First thing that we have to do is we have to live in service. Now, you hear about that a ton in faith, right? You'll hear a lot of people who are very deeply faithful talk about faith being service to others. But we don't think about that on a personal branding level, how we live our day-to-day lives. Anytime you can think about, how can I do my best to create benefit for other people, to try to make their lives better, to help them in some way, to support them, lift them up. Every little thing that we can do to lift others lifts us simultaneously. Now, we don't think of it initially, but if we spend most of our time looking around at what can we do for ourselves to make our own lives better? How can I climb out of this ditch that I'm in? How can I make more money? How can I get my boss to recognize what a great performer I am? How can I make more friends? Why don't people like me? If I'm always thinking of that internally, I go into a spiral cycle of poor me. Woe is my life. Things are not the way I want them to be. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if instead I say, I don't really like where my life is right now, I don't like what's going on in my world, let me solve it by doing my best to help other people, to serve others in whatever way I can. So instead of lifting myself up on LinkedIn, I go and I look at all of my friends who I admire, and I start to brag about them on LinkedIn. Look at the amazing things that they are doing right now. Look how exciting their world is. Look at the wonderful things they've achieved and accomplished. I look around my family at the people who need the most assistance, and I say, what can I do for them today? Can I maybe go to the grocery store because their life is crazed? Maybe I offer to watch their kid for a little while. I don't have a lot of money, but you know what I could do? I could make a pot of soup on the stove and bring them some soup because I know they've been really stressed out and their life's been tough. Simple little ways to serve others. What ends up over time is we develop a more positive mindset, not only about what we're doing with our day-to-day. We're not focusing on how little money we make or how hard our life is. We're focusing on positivity, and it comes back to us tenfold. Does that all make sense?
It does. And I guess if a person is deep down going through bouts of depression where they're so insular about themselves, reminds me of a quote by the late actor Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas's father. He said that the best way to cure depression is to go volunteer somewhere.
Oh, yeah, baby. I have not heard that quote before. I'm so glad you shared that with me. I think that's quite brilliant.
I mean, something roundabout, but I think it certainly speaks to being in service to others.
I'll add one to it since you brought up Kirk Douglas. I love that. I've not heard it before. For people who are big podcast fans, you might have heard of a guy named Dave Stacoviak. He does the Coaching for Leaders podcast, terrific podcast. But he talks about how leaders are not naturally charismatic. Leadership in and of itself, choosing to lead, creates charisma, right? So we like to think, a lot of people think, now I'm just a cog in the wheel. Other people are leading the charge. Other people are the ones who are out front. I'm a follower. And what I always like to say to people is, go be a leader. Go lead by example. Lead with service. Lead with care for others. Lead with delivering value. Because just by doing that alone, you start to create your own charisma. People look at you and say, that person cares about me. They want my life to be better. Therefore, I want to be more engaged in them and what it is that they're doing. And your value, your internal value, begins to lift as you lift the value of others.
And I think that goes back to what you had mentioned. I think a lot of it comes from listening. And you mentioned it was brilliantly, it comes from a deep layer of respect. How do you mean?
Respect is such a tough word, right? Because a lot of people that feel that respect has to be earned, right? You don't just get respect. There are different schools of thought on this. Depending on where you are in the world, this becomes cultural. There are those who believe that children are born to be respected, and it is up to them to maintain that respect without losing it. Other people feel that children are born empty, They're born with no redeeming qualities. It is up to them to prove themselves in order to earn that respect. But the nature of respect, that inner spirit, comes from, again, caring about others. There is another, I mean, since we're doing quotes, we've done such a great job of quotes, right? Go to Dale Carnegie. I'm a businessman. I work with businesses. Dale Carnegie had one of the greatest quotes ever that's been requoted again and again, and it is that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Our instinct is to try to be interesting enough that others will care about us. But instead, if we go out, as I've been saying before, and invest in other people, show them respect, assume that they deserve our respect, and demonstrate that respect, that comes from listening to them, caring about what they have to say, investing in them personally, and by showing them that respect, their respect for us flies through the ceiling. It becomes enormous. It always works. It will work with almost everybody on the planet. It's because of our natural instincts, our human nature. There was a terrific TED Talk a number of years ago. I don't know if you ever saw this, but if you haven't seen it, a guy named Yuri Hassan, who runs the Hassan Laboratory at Princeton. He's retired now from Princeton, but he did a great 2016 TED Talk called "This Is Your Brain on Communication." And it was about a scientific concept that he came up with called experience-based chemical synchronization, which you can also call brain coupling. All right, what does all that nonsense mean? What it means is we can get other people to experience something that we ourselves have experienced built around shared narratives, right? There are certain things that all of us as human beings have a shared narrative of doing. We all have a childhood. We all went to school. We all had relationships. We all had parents who we dealt with, or siblings, or family members. We all, some of us go to university or beyond, or upper level schools. We try to get a job. We try to earn money. We try to find love. We try to have a family. We try to buy a home. We might travel. We eat food. There are certain things that I know about every person listening to the two of us talk right now. I already know about them, even though I don't know their name. I've never met them before. My job as a good communicator is to figure out where we align. What do we share in common? You know how I do it? I ask questions. I become genuinely interested in the person I'm talking to, and I try to glean little bits of information so that we can find out, where are we aligned with one another? Where do we line up our thoughts? As soon as we do that, that person says, oh, he respects me. He cares about me enough to ask these questions. And you know what people love talking about most? Themselves. Yeah, we love talking about ourselves. So when somebody asks us a lot of questions and we get to talk about ourselves, most of the time we think, oh, I like hanging out with this person. They're kind of cool. Yeah, they ask me questions. I get to talk about me. And then if I'm a good communicator, I then turn it around and ask them questions so they feel good and they get to talk about themselves.
Well, I am curious to find out, speaking of talking about ourselves, what is something that your audience may not know about you, from the people that you've coached, from the leadership that you've, what's some of the things that gives Steve Multer a human, uh, the foundation of that of a human being? I mean, I know you talked about being service in others, listening. Those are all critical skills for corporate storytelling and from your personal brand. What's something that your listeners, your fans, want to know about you?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I don't know that I'm interesting enough that they want to know that much more about me. But since you asked, and thank you for asking, I appreciate it. All right. This is going to feel like a bit of a sideline. Had I not gone into the work that I had gone into, my dream job, anybody who knows Rick Steves as a travel guide, he's one of my mentors, gurus, an amazing guy on top of being brilliant at what he does. I always wanted to be Steve Steves. And what I loved so much about what Rick does as a travel writer, as a travel guide on PBS and with all of his books, is that anybody can talk about the joy of travel. Get out there, see the world, explore. What Rick does so brilliantly is that he gets into the mind of the traveler to say, what do you want your experience to be? And if I know you as my audience, and I believe that I do know you as my audience, I want to take you on the journey that I know you want to go on, even if you don't know yet that you want to go on it. Which is why he started by writing an amazing book called Europe Through the Back Door, and another book called History 101 that said, you don't need to know everything about history. You don't need to go visit every place in Paris. Here is how you maximize that experience to get exactly what you want out of the money and the time that you're going to spend on that travel. And I remember reading that as a young guy, as a teenager who wanted to travel, and think, that's so brilliant, because what was he doing? Serving people. So I would be a travel planner, and I do that for loads and loads and loads of people anyway. I've had a lot of travels in my professional career and in personal life, which have given me a great sense into it. So I do a lot of travel as a background, but again, I look at it as service. And here's one more thing that I don't usually tell people when I coach. When friends call me and they say, hey, I want to go to Singapore for a week and then KL for a week. How do I do it? And I map it all out for them. They always think, oh, I can't believe you're taking all this time. Thank you. And what I will always say to them is, you don't understand. Not only do I love doing this for people, very grateful that I can do it, but my gratitude extends to something very self-serving. By helping you map out your trip, I get to travel vicariously through you. I know where you're going to go. I know the experiences you're going to have. I get to go along with you on that ride. So when you write to me from those places, or you take photos from those places, I get to be there with you. It serves me by serving others in that regard. So that's an area of service that people may not know about me, is that if I didn't do this, I would just help people book travel. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but it sort of ties together to the gratitude that's the theme of your podcast.
No, it's brilliant, because what Luke Russert, who I had on the guest on the program, he did say that through his travels after losing his father, Tim Russert, I think what travel did for him and experiencing these different cultures is taking that journey of self-discovery within ourselves, to know who you are, right? In terms of the cultures that you interact with, the nuances in terms of mannerisms, to make you more whole as an individual, that you could be more understanding of how things work. And I think that's something that Steve Multer, former CNN producer, shared as well, as she was stationed in Africa. So very much aligned to that point, Steve. So thank you for sharing that dimension of what travel does.
What about for you? If we have a moment, let me ask you. I would love to ask what that side of you is that maybe your listeners don't get to know so well.
I chase tranquility, that calm, undisturbed mind. And for me, with all the noise that gets polluted in our heads, whether that's doubting yourself, the projects, the pressures, the deadlines, it's trying to get mental clarity that you can be your best. And that only comes with having that calmness between the ears. And that's certainly something that I strive for. Now, it kind of goes against the public persona of YoggNation. The ego is the size of the United States, because at the heart of it, I really want to be able to affect societal change in the manner that an individual going through a struggle, going through a hardship, can take a moment of their time to listening to a reel from you or from a guest, or listening to the full episode, and say, this is the exact message I needed at that right time to help reframe things in perspective.
Could not have put it better myself. Ego is such an important thing, right? If you look at the list of corporations that I support on a regular basis, again, you mentioned a few of them at the beginning: Cisco, Splunk, Sony, Panasonic, HP, Fujifilm, Siemens, LG, Bayer, Lufthansa, Intel. These are massive corporations that I work with on a daily basis. And when you just see those names, you start to think, well, how do you get in there? How do you help them to achieve that, what you just said, that sense of calm, that inner peace, that focus, that getting rid of the clutter and getting rid of the noise in order to get to the core value that creates good life? This is so much of what I try to do with these companies on a daily basis. I work with their CMOs. I work with their outbound communications people. I work with their internal teams to try to get them to remove the clutter, clarify the message, create value for the marketplace. And it's incredibly difficult to do, because they're just being beaten down by demand from leadership. So when I can get in with the executive team, that's my favorite place to be, that says, what are you asking your people to do? What is the nature of your communication, and how are you providing value? Are you just telling them what you want them to do? Because when we tell people what to do, they turn away. They don't do it. That's why teams underperform. They underperform because they have demands put on them and they're being dehumanized. If we go back to those three layers, right, of content hierarchy, that flow: human first, consumer second, people who buy things, and employee third. And everybody flips that on its head, right? Everybody goes to the employee first. I'm going to tell my employee what to do. I'm going to tell my employee the direction of the company. I'm going to tell somebody what I want them to buy from me. It's marketing, it's pitching, it's personal promotion, and it fails. We have to put the human being first in all those conversations. It's what I try to do with these large corporations, and it's what you are doing on an individual level all the way down in trying to clear out the clutter, get to the peace and the core value that gives your life joy. Remove the ego.
Brilliantly said. That's a Zen topic that perhaps maybe we can explore the next time I have you on, Steve, because that is a whole tangent. But Steve, I just wanted to say thank you kindly for coming on the YoggNation podcast. I think certainly the listeners, hopefully if you've found a nugget of wisdom, please do share that to your friends and family, because we are all in it to support one another. Steve and I may not know who you are, may not know your struggles and challenges, but rest assured you're not the only one, right? I have my issues. Steve, I'm sure, has his issues, but we all learn from another, and that's the purpose and mission and of the podcast. Steve, final word. Anything you'd like to share before we close out?
I will offer to anybody who's interested, I've created a free e-guide that I think is extremely beneficial. It's called 5 Paths to Passionate Storytelling. If you want to get out there and tell your story better, feel more confident about the value that you create for others, help to build your own sense of trust in yourself, you can go and pick that up. Just go to corporatestorytelling.com/guide. And then you'll put in this code, all lowercase, sold told 23, all one word, sold told 23. You can pick up that e-guide, but 5 paths to passionate storytelling. It'll help you just get your communication where you want it to be, and feel more comfortable and confident about what it is that you do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.